Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum ad nastana. Pleasure to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio and continuing this journey of light and knowledge that we began over 4 years ago now. And if you recall, this year, I'm doing a series of segments on world leaders and fraternalism. Now, this is, I believe it will be the fourth segment in our series. And today we are going to what one might consider to be the mother country of fraternalism, Great Britain. Okay? At least of Freemasonry. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to say to you that I was kind of surprised when I began my investigation into fraternalism, particularly Freemasonry, in Great Britain, that we did not have more prime ministers involved in Freemasonry, and some of the ones that I believed were rather steeped in it really weren't as involved in it as I originally thought. There's also many of them that were into some other organizations quite involved that there again, I honestly was rather surprised at some of their involvement in organizations outside of Freemasonry. So we're going to learn together as we go along here, brothers and sisters, right? So trim your lamps, follow me, and I think you'll be as surprised as I was going forward. Now, moving forward, let's not have any conflict, first of all, before we move forward, actually. Okay? I'm only quoting you what my research has showed. Okay? Now, originally, Freemasonry in Great Britain had medieval roots, and it was originally the stonemasons that formed lodges or guilds to regulate their trade secrets and protect their work. Okay? Now, as the great cathedrals and castles, as there weren't many more of them to be built anymore, lodges began accepting honorary members or gentlemen and transformed into speculative, or shall we say, the movement transitioned into more philosophical Freemasonry. Now, the first documented member of Freemasonry was Elias Ashmole, and he is recorded to have been initiated as a Freemason in Warrington, United Kingdom in 1646. The foundation of the first Grand Lodge of Great Britain was in 1717, on June 24th to be exact, and 4 London lodges met at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern and founded the first Grand Lodge of Great Britain. Like I said, some of these dates are tentative. This is what I know this kind of thing always leads to a lot of people just go crazy when you talk about some of this stuff. But that's what my research has shown. Feel free to chime in, Freemasons, if you wish. Now, the Royal Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes were founded in 1822 by 2 gentlemen. First of all, artist Joseph Lyle and a comedian named William Sennett. It was formed at the Harp Tavern on Drury Lane to provide camaraderie for theatrical staff. Now, initially the RAOB was just called the Buffaloes, and some believe that that name was chosen from a popular song called We'll Chase the Buffalo. The order expanded as members toured the country. Lodges spread throughout the British Commonwealth and the United Kingdom during the 1800s. Now, while starting out as a social club with harmony sessions, it developed into a serious philanthropic organization and focused on helping members, their families, and their dependents. Now moving forward to the Druids, okay? The Druids have a very, shall we say, complex and ancient history within the United Kingdom. However, modern Druidry, shall we say, or the Druid revival began when scholars and antiquarians linked prehistoric sites like the Stonehenge to ancient Druids. Now, these early modern Druids were often portrayed as monotheistic and natural philosophers, and sometimes they were seen as precursors to British Christianity. Now Druidry became blended as time went on with Freemasonry and Romantic nationalism, and groups like the Ancient and Archaeological Order of Druids began emerging. Now, modern British Druidry, as we know it today, is a diverse and it generally focuses on reverence for nature, the celebration of the seasons, and for many polytheistic and pantheistic beliefs. Druidry operates largely as a nature-based creative spiritual movement rather than a strict reconstruction of the ancient Celtic practices. The Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows was formed in 1810. Now, dissatisfied members of the Grand United Order met at the Rope Makers Pub in Salford and established a more structured society to provide welfare, which became known as the Manchester Unity. The purpose of the Manchester Unity Oddfellows was to be a friendly society, and it served as a safety net for workers to protect their families during sickness and distress. Throughout the 19th century, the Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows spread rapidly across Britain and internationally. Manchester Unity adopted the Manchester Compliance Organization into branches that held their meetings in pubs and later built their own Oddfellows halls. By the mid-19th century, the Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows had become the largest and wealthiest friendly society in the United Kingdom. How about that? So let's start with the first Prime Minister who was noted to have been involved in fraternalism in Great Britain, and that was Henry Addington. He was Prime Minister from the 17th of March, 1801 to the 10th of May, 1804. He was known to have been involved with Freemasonry in Buckinghamshire and is mentioned in connection with the St. Martin's Lodge number 2812. His achievements as Prime Minister were many, but one notable was the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, which negotiated a temporary peace with France and provided a brief respite from the French Revolutionary Wars. He enacted financial reforms such as reorganizing their national finances of Great Britain and improved the efficiency of the income tax collection. George Canning, Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 12th of April 1827 to the 8th of August 1827, was made a Freemason in the Prince of Wales Lodge in London in 1810. Some of his achievements as Prime Minister were recognizing the independence of the former Spanish colonies in South America. This secured significant trade advantages for British merchants and prevented other European powers from intervening. He detached Great Britain from the Holy Alliance of Russia, Austria, and Prussia, and refused to let Britain be used to suppress liberal movements on the continent. Mr. Canning played a key role in supporting the Greek struggle against the Ottoman rule And this culminated in the Treaty of London in 1827, which paved the way for an independent Greece. In 1826, Mr. Canning sent troops to Portugal to defend its constitutional government against a Spanish-backed invasion. Mr. Canning was an advocate for Catholic emancipation, and throughout his career, not just as Prime Minister, but before and after, he was prominent, though often frustrated, proponent of Catholic emancipation. And this was a political movement. The Catholic emancipation was actually a political movement in the 18th century and early 19th centuries. It was designed to remove severe legal, social, and political restrictions imposed on Roman Catholics in Great Britain and Ireland. Arthur Wellesley comes across as, shall we say, this one's a little convoluted. Arthur Wellesley, first of all, was Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 17th of November 1834 to the 9th of December 1834, and he is a documented member of the Trim Lodge number 494 in Ireland. Right? Now, in his later years, specifically in a letter in 1851, he wrote a letter to a friend of his and stated that he had no recollection of having been admitted as a Freemason and no knowledge of his association with the Freemasons. Now, despite that, he is historically documented as a member in the records of the Grand Lodge of Ireland, and a set of his spurs was presented to the Wellington Lodge number 341 in Rye, England, to honor his initiation. It's interesting that he would feel like that. Now, as Prime Minister, he led a Tory government that pushed through the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829. He is also a member, he was also a founder of the King's College in London, and he supported the establishment of the King's College in London in 1829. Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman was Prime Minister from the 5th of December 1905 to the 3rd of April 1908. Mr. Bannerman was initiated into the craft in 1866 at the Royal Alexandra Lodge in Scotland. Now, after joining the craft, Mr. Bannerman served in various chairs and roles within the organization before becoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. As Prime Minister, Mr. Bannerman successfully granted self-government to the Boer states and promoted long-term reconciliation following the Boer War. He introduced the Trades Dispute Act of 1906, which strengthened unions, and the provision of the School of Meals Act and the Workmen's Compensation Act. He established a basis for modern probation for offenders in 1907. Bonar Law was Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 23rd of October 1922 to the 20th of May 1923. This gentleman is interesting. He was actually born, he may have been the Prime Minister of Great Britain, but he was born in Rexton, New Brunswick, Canada. Now, Mr. Bonar Law became an entered apprentice on the 31st of August 1900 at the Bridgeton in Glasgow Shamrock and Thistle Lodge 275. He reorganized the party, his party after 1911, and he was the first of Prime Minister from a non-aristocratic background. He rejuvenated the Conservative Party machine. He improved relations with the press. He revitalized local branches and modernized party finances and transformed the Conservative Party from a gentleman's club into a professional political machine. Interesting, isn't it? Really, like, Stanley Baldwin was Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 7th of June 1935 to the 28th of May 1937. Mr. Baldwin was a member of the Manchester Unity Oddfellows. Now, Mr. Baldwin's government, and particularly when he was working with Neville Chamberlain, introduced comprehensive social reforms, and that included extending contributory pensions, housing, and slum clearance, and the restructuring of local governments. In 1928, when he was a member of Baldwin's government, he extended the vote to women on the same terms as men at the age of 21. And he essentially finalized Great Britain's transition into a fully democratic state. Before he became Prime Minister, during the 1926 general strike, Baldwin maintained a policy of firm, calm, and conciliatory action that defeated the strike while avoiding major bloodshed. Now, Mr. Baldwin supported the Statute of Westminster in 1931, which granted Dominion status to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. This marked a shift towards the formation of the British Commonwealth. Now, Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 10th of May 1940 to the 26th of July 1945, and then again from the 26th of October 1951 to the 5th of April 1955. Mr. Churchill was initiated into the Studham Lodge, number 1591, on the 24th of May 1901. He was 27 years old at the time. He was raised to the Fellow Craft at the 19th of July, of 1901, and then raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason on the 5th of March, 1902. Now, it's been said that Churchill's membership in the craft was more of a social thing, and his involvement effectively ceased after he became a Master Mason. You saw this before in many other lives, haven't you, where not just Freemasonry, but other organizations, where once a person, reaches a certain degree, they kind of become more social members. Now, apparently, it's believed that Churchill may have resigned from the lodge in July of 1912, likely due to his political commitments. However, Mr. Churchill's lodge apron is preserved at the Museum of Freemasonry in London. Mr. Churchill joined the Loyal Waterloo Lodge number 96, Independent Order of Oddfellows, in 1907, and remained a member until his death in 1965. He was also a member of the Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows. Mr. Churchill was also an active member of the Ancient Order of Druids. He was initiated into the order in the early 20th century as part of his dabbling in various esoteric and fraternal organizations. Here's a photograph from 1908 that shows Mr. Churchill as a member of the Ancient Order of Druids at Blenheim, Oxfordshire. Harold Macmillan was the Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1957 to 1963. He was also a member of the Royal Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes before becoming Prime Minister. He presided over a period of rising wages, low unemployment, and a consumer spending boom. As Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan accelerated the independence of British colonies in Africa and Asia. He also repaired U.S. relations following the damage caused to the alliance, the Anglo-American alliance, by the Suez Crisis. He also acted as a key negotiator for the nuclear test ban with the United States and the Soviet Union, and he ended national service in Great Britain. So, I'm going to try to finish this off as best I can. This was, as I warned you at the very start of the segment, not just fascinating, but in some cases convoluted, where you have prime ministers who had, shall we say, rather convoluted, particularly with the craft, it seems, convoluted membership in it, where you have a prime minister, for instance, Arthur Wellesley, who claimed he had no knowledge of belonging to Freemasonry, but he was documented as a member of the Trim Lodge 494 under the Irish Constitution. But also, moving further up in the line, you see that Mr. Prime Minister Churchill sounds to me like he was more of a social member of the craft, right? And his involvement within Freemasonry may or may not have ended, right, in 1912. I honestly don't believe they would keep his lodge apron at the Museum of Freemasonry in London if he really hadn't stayed in. It may or may not be, it may be just me, but I find that rather interesting, right? I also find that it interesting, for instance, that Mr. Churchill seemed to have remained, although he was less active in the craft, that he stayed very active and a member, prominent member from what I understand, of Oddfellows until his death in 1965. And there's no real indicator that he left the Ancient Order of Druids either. And I find that interesting that he stayed in that. Having said that, he was very much he was very much the adventurous type, loved the outdoors, right? If you ever look at him, he was quite involved in the military. So maybe that extended into some of his interest in the Ancient Order of Druids, right? And that wouldn't surprise me. Now, another observation I get when I look at this is something that's very prominent both in the craft and in other fraternal orders as well. But is this, with these prime ministers, it's their continuous efforts to bring peace and harmony and respect for one's fellow human being. Prime example, starting with Henry Addington, where he negotiated a temporary peace with France, right? And provided a brief respite from the French Revolutionary Wars. That wanting to kind of end conflict, right? Mr. Canning recognized the independence of former Spanish colonies in South America, right? That respect for one's fellow man, right? Right? Mr. Bannerman successfully granted self-government to the Boer states and promoted long-term reconciliation following the Boer War. There again, an often overlooked war, that South African campaign or Boer War. Canada participated in that as well. And you see a prime minister attempting to kind of, bind up some old wounds there and heal the rifts that were formed, right? I really like that. Right. And of course, looking forward to Mr. Baldwin, a member of the Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows, right? He introduced social reforms. He extended, his government extended the right of women to vote, right? And essentially finalized Britain's transition into a fully democratic state. That tells you something, as you've heard in other segments in our world leaders in fraternalism, right? That this continuous effort to bring, a more conciliatory approach to things and fairness, right? I think you're seeing a continuation of that here. The other thing I've noticed, and maybe it's just me, but Great Britain is supposed to be where many of these fraternal orders basically came from, especially when it came to the colonies, North America, and so on. But if you look at it, is it just me, or did there seem to be, and you'll see going forward when we study United States presidents and fraternalism, but it may be just me, but I think United States presidents were much more involved in both the craft and fraternalism than the British prime ministers. And I don't doubt going forward, just before anyone starts getting too heated about this or gets their back up, that when looking at this, we've only really scratched the surface. I have no doubt in my mind that there were more prime ministers in Great Britain, or even some of the other countries we've studied. They were more involved than meets the eye. They were probably in other orders as well. Like when it comes to the Orange Order and the RAOB, I don't doubt in some of the former British colonies there were prime ministers who were much more involved in those two orders than they list. And some, to be fair, many of the fraternal orders outside of Freemasonry don't do quite the job that Freemasons do about making a note of who is involved with them, right? And with that, I'm going to leave the rest of the analysis with you. Isn't this fun? Isn't this interesting, though, studying this stuff? I don't know, but maybe I'm just a history buff, right? But I want to draw your attention to, first of all, the PayPal link in the details section of this segment, right? You can hit on that, make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio, and I will use that to move this podcast forward. Everything you see here is not, I repeat, not sponsor driven. I also want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also do want to see your comment and input. Your comments and input. These particular segments, let's have it, brothers and sisters. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My X handle is at PO Light Radio. My Bluesky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel in the details section, as well as my Points of Light Radio store, where you can hit on that and buy some interesting and affordable merchandise, fraternal merchandise. Brothers and sisters, it's been a pleasure bringing this segment to you. Until we meet again, just step into the light and remember your history.